We are on? Okay. Welcome those who are joining us through our live stream. And as I was telling them, and I posted earlier, so hopefully you've seen that, tonight we're looking at a very familiar psalm, and that is Psalm 23. I'll read that in a few moments, but I want to talk about fear. What's fear? Or what are you afraid of, if anything? You're afraid of the dark. I will know not to come. Do you have lights that come on? Or should we just come up with our big flashlight when we come and announce ourselves? Okay. Yeah. Why are you fearful of the dark, Tracy? This church, okay. Those two I cannot even imagine. Yeah. He doesn't have that story. Somehow you instilled that in him. All right. So that actually is a question I have. So if you go out by yourself, are you if Ann goes out with you, are you less afraid of the dark than when you go out by yourself? Okay. So as long as Ann's there to protect you in the dark, you're good. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your honesty. So Tracy's been very honest. Time for some other you people to fess up. Snakes, me too. So a poll. Let's see if this holds. Who's afraid of spiders? All right. Those of you that are afraid of spiders, are you afraid of snakes? Yeah. Usually it's, okay, so you just blew. Okay, never mind. But a lot of times, because I'll pick up a spider. If there was a spider to go down here, I'm getting the spider, and I'm taking him outside, and I'm letting him free. Did that in staff meeting one time. They thought I was absolutely insane. No. Now, a snake, I have killed a snake that is that big, and I looked it up, and it was a worm. It was not a snake. But it looked like a snake. It had a little head on it. I'm not saying it's rational. I'm just saying, in fact, that I guess fear is sometimes not rational. But what else? So snakes, I'm fearful of snakes. Spiders all day long. They don't bite. Creepy dolls, DOLLS. So do you do Chucky? You don't watch? Did he take you out in the dark and chase it with a chainsaw? No, okay.
He sat it up in my room and put a Ouija board on top of it.
The doll?
Yes. And I had no idea. I walked in my room.
Did it start moving?
Screaming.
Yeah.
Like, what in the world? No creepy dolls. No,
Okay.
if you do, I will hurt you.
So we have some rationale behind why Tracy said he was. What about the rest of us? What about spiders because of them biting us or something? Or why are you afraid of spiders? Okay, they look nasty. All right. Okay. You can take that up with God because He created them. But no, I'm teasing. Okay. All right. Other fears. Anybody have any other that you're just like? Okay, sure. All right, the unknown. Well, I say sure, but, a lot of life's unknown, so. What else? Anybody else? What? The future because of the unknown or just, okay. All right, yeah. Anything else? Heights? Yeah, right here. Yep. Yeah, I don't like real high places. My mom was fearful if we would go. You remember I think it was is it East Lake Mall in Charlotte? Was there such a mall with the ice rink? Eastland. Okay. So Eastland Mall with the ice rink, and you could look over the ice rink. My mom would be terrified when we would when we would get too close to a railing. And of course, once we figured that out, that's all we did. But I mean, just really terrified for us that, afraid that we would go over the side. So heights, but yeah, okay. Well, I've given you here, as we begin, fear defined as an unpleasant emotion and caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous. I guess maybe snakes and spiders, all those things, is likely to cause pain or is a threat. The porcelain doll thing. Yeah. Yeah. And isn't it nice to have a loving husband that yeah, I bet he hadn't. Very good. So I've given you also, and that's an easy way to remember it because there's 365 days in a year, and I have not read all of I have not read each one, so I'm going by what I've studied, and that there are some, in some way, do not fear is listed, said, some 365 times in the Bible. So, if we're told in the Bible, do not fear, flesh that out for me. Why are we told some 365 times in the Bible not to fear? Okay, so we're not to fear. Like God's saying, all right, because God's with us. So spider comes down, and I'm bringing real life stuff. Spider comes down, we look at it and wave and say, God's with us. He's not going. It says, do not fear. So we're that literal, are we? You believe it from Holy Bible at the beginning to genuine leather at the back, right? And if it doesn't say it, it's not in it. Okay. All right. It's okay to fear spiders. Good. All right. Some say the Bible says do not fear, which means we're not to fear. Y'all know, if you've heard me, I do believe that because God is with us, we should not be a fearful people. But I also believe that if it's said 365 times in the Bible, that indicates that humans are fearful, because there's a need to mention that, okay? So one thing you could do would be to look all those up, and you have a do not fear devotion for the next year, if you were to want that. I've given you here in your notes, I believe Jesus experienced fear when he prayed in the garden. Differing times, I think he was fearful. We know Peter was afraid, right? When he denied even knowing him. The reason was he was fearful that he would be associated with Jesus and that he would suffer the same fate as Jesus was going to suffer. Some have heard, the reason I started that way is conversations I've had lately, both with adults who I've talked to either on the phone or in my office, and also the teenagers that I coach, have talked a lot lately about fear, about things that they fear. And it's more of a overall sense of fear, right? Not a spider, not a snake, not a porcelain doll, not those type of things, but just more that fearful of maybe the future, fearful of the unknown, things like that. And I think, or I wouldn't have begun that way, that Psalm 23 can help us with that. We're towards the end of the school year, so I think graduation is May 30th, I believe. And I had someone just yesterday, what should I do with my future? What do you want to do with your future? So we fleshed that out, but the core was, this person was kind of fearful of whichever route they took. If I went this route, this could happen. Or if I went that route, that could happen. Or those type of things. And the truth of the matter is, when we look at things, we can either see things as opportunities or as something to fear. Okay. Anything else on fear when you think about that? Anything on how do you overcome it? Okay. Oh, absolutely. So what's the difference? Good. That's a good. Did you hear it? Everybody didn't hear that. There are also scriptures that say fear the Lord. Absolutely. So what's the difference between do not fear and the fears that we've talking about, spiders and whatnot, and our fear of the Lord? Because I believe we are to fear the Lord. Okay. So it's more of an awe, more of a reverence, not a shaky, terrified type fear. Okay. Yeah. All right. No. Is the fear of the Lord? Yeah. Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Very good. So maybe our fear of the Lord can help us with our other fears. So let me read, I'll read the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Okay. I've told individuals this, and I think I've said this publicly before. When life kind of gets tough, when life brings troubles, when life, on pretty regular occasion, I'll start reading through the Psalter, all 150. I recommend to people when they're going through kind of difficult times, start with Psalm 1, and you got 150 days of readings. And I do so because David and the psalmist, in my opinion, and again, this isn't new information for most of you, at least my opinion, is that's a diary. They're songs. Yes, they sung them in the temple, those types of things. But they flesh out what they're going through and where they find strength, but also where they find fear, where they find angst, where they have difficulties in life. So, and as I've said here, the psalmist, David, or other psalmists, wore their emotions on their sleeves. If they were thinking it, they pretty much wrote it down. What I find interesting is how helpful that seems to have been for them. Because what I find interesting is either a chapter or sometimes a chapter or two later, but most of the times it's within that chapter. They'll start out with something that's causing them concern, something that's causing them fear, that type of thing. And by the end of their journal entry, if you will, they've kind of fleshed it out and figured out where God is in that equation. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to do. If you don't keep a journal and you're inclined to writing, I would recommend that. Okay, so I was hesitant, I'm giving you that in your notes, to do Psalm 23, mainly because it's so well known. It's one that we hear read, we've read time and again probably, studied in Sunday school, those types of things. But also because it's associated with what? Funerals. Absolutely. It's read a lot at funerals. And if you've heard me at a graveside or that type of thing, read Psalm 23 as well as other Psalms. But I usually preface it by saying, certainly I want it to provide comfort for people during that time of need. But Psalm 23 is a psalm for living. Psalm 23 is a psalm for every day, for what we can learn. Let's see. The center of it is literally chapter 4. Okay? We got, there's 6 verses, but you go the first 3, and even though I walk through the darkest valley, through the valley of the shadow of death, I will do what? Fear no evil. So there's one of those, 365 of those. So the ways that I've given you to translate that is darkest valley, but also the valley of the shadow of death. I've brought mine, and at the end we'll read from the Message, which is Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of our Holy Scriptures. He translates that verse, Death Valley. He translates it, and even though I walk through Death Valley. Somewhat humorously, I've given you one of my thoughts on that, and that is 2 stadiums in our country, one being the original Death Valley and the other being Louisiana. Y'all are supposed to laugh at that. Please laugh at that. I'm just being funny, or lack thereof. But the other is in California. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I've pulled up, that is the lowest, driest, and hottest desert in the United States. I mean, that's what I have found out. Since began keeping records, the hottest temperature in the country, 134 degrees, occurred there, and during the summertime, it's not uncommon for it to reach 120 degrees. Okay? So if you're going to visit, I'd maybe visit the other 3 seasons. All right, but unlike anybody who might try to visit that Death Valley, the valley of the shadow of the death, we don't know when, right? We don't know when the darkest times, the darkest valleys are coming. And if we don't know when that is, it can be difficult to prepare for those times when they come. So how do we do that? Or can we do that? Maybe that's a better question. When that dark valley is around the corner, how do we prepare as best we can for those difficult times? Or can we, or do we just sort of white knuckle it and make it through? Turn around and go the other way. All right. How else? Was it? I think it was Winston Churchill, and I'll paraphrase his statement that said, if you're going through hell, keep going. What does that mean? Yeah, I mean, keep going through, because there's got to be an end to it, right? Okay, so it'll be better on the other side, light at the end of the tunnel type thing. Okay, how else can we prepare? What are some ways that we can prepare for those dark times in life? Because I believe they hit all of us. Okay, what we're doing now: Bible study, pray. What we did. All right. How else? Any other ways? Community. All right. Yeah, have other people. How does that help? They can do what? Okay, so yeah, all right. My immediate thought was a running analogy, go figure. But when you run in a group, Robbie, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you run in a group, if you're not feeling it, but some of the other group are, they can help you keep pace sometimes, right, Robbie? Sometimes. So, but that analogy is when you're feeling down, when you're going through a dark valley, others' faith can help lift you up, or at least sustain you through that. Okay, good. There we go. The value of support groups, right? So they could have gone through a similar or the same type of things. Absolutely, good. Other ways. Are there other ways? Great ways, and agree with all of them. Okay. I've given you here, I drive a 1999 Toyota Tacoma Pre-Runner, TRD. What's TRD mean? Well, that was quick. Wow. Mine says it boldly on the back, right above the back quarter panel, whatever that's called back there. Okay. He said it's an oxymoron, Toyota racing development. I don't know either. The first time I ever came upon TRD was a truck that was in the desert that was jumping a sand dune, right? I don't know if it was real life or if they simulated it in a commercial, but I've given you here, and I think it ties in with what we're talking about, is they do that because they want you to be able to see how their vehicles perform in intense conditions, okay? So my analogy, I haven't given that in your notes, my analogy with that is if we as God's people don't handle death valleys of death, dark times, different than the rest, then there is other benefits to God, but let me rephrase that as I'm talking about that. What do we have to offer the world as followers of God that can help them as it's helped us in difficult times? Does that make sense? I hope. Do we have anything to offer to the world when the world is going through a tough time? Because I don't know if you've looked lately, but the world's going. Oil microphone. Okay, there we go. So what do we have to offer? Or do we? Hope. Why? Jesus, okay. Good answer. We're sitting in church, but I mean, when we go back out there and we say Jesus to them. Okay, God's promise is never going to leave us. He loves us. Okay, yeah. How does this begin? We're studying Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. So what does that mean? He is going to lead you. So in my studies of that, shepherd, those hearing this for the first time would have made the jump with shepherd and king. Now, we might not necessarily make that jump in present day time. But a king was put over his people, right? To protect his people, to be there for his people, okay? So it was more king watching over people than it is king expecting people to be subservient to him. Does that make sense? Okay, so with that, what David is writing is, the Lord is my, exactly. Which is who he follows, who is going to protect him, who is all those things, okay? So the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not what? Okay? Everybody have everything they want? So how does that work? Okay. All right. So most of us have most of what we need. Okay, versus a want. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Everything that we want should be with the Lord, not what we personally.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. No, that's actually. So the next step that the next thing I was going to ask was, who can remember how they were before Jesus was their king? Somebody can. Right? Were your wants different then than they are now? I think that's what I heard you say, right? Okay. How? I mean, y'all were chatting away right before we began this thing. How? How are your wants different? How are your wants different when Jesus becomes your king than they were prior to Jesus being your king, or shepherd, if you like that better? Okay. Okay. Change your perspective. How? In what way? Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Other thoughts? So if it changes our perspective, how does that, are there other ways our perspective changes? When the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Okay? How does that change our perspective? When we become followers of Jesus, what is our perspective? How does our perspective change? What does our perspective become? What are we concerned with? Go ahead. Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. 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 It does to me, sure. Does the rest of what we get up till verse 4 help us? Jesus changes our perspective. I understand this is Old Testament. So, a Hebrew scholar would say, why are you bringing Jesus into this? Well, I read the Bible through Jesus' lens. I mean, that's my answer. So, and not in the, I'm not, anyway, so yeah. So our perspective changes in that, and pre-Jesus, even post, because, as I've grown in my faith, was talking to somebody at Track today. And it doesn't matter exactly what we were talking about, but started sharing some things from my high school years as well. And all of a sudden they're like, you were kind of selfish. And I was like, you better believe it. You know why? Because in high school and college and early adulthood, guess who it was about? All about me. My center, what's the word? My focus was egocentric, right? It was all about me. How can you help me? What can you do for me? How are you going to, all those things. That was my total focus, okay? But once I continued to grow in faith, the focus was less and, I can still be selfish, mind you, but the focus was less and less egocentric and more what? Hey, it's out there, guys. It's caring about what others hear. It's caring about others coming to know Christ. It's caring about, those types of things. And I think that's when we read in verse 2, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet, still, waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the paths for his name's sake. When Jesus, and you may think this is a misreading of it, but I'm going to say, when we become followers of Jesus, the path we're on changes. And it changes our perspective. And it is totally not about us. Now, God still is concerned with us because he's still the shepherd, and the shepherd carries what? A rod and a staff. What are they for? How do they comfort us? Protection. See, okay. So when we go out in the dark, we don't need Ann. Tell him God's out there, and you tell him, well, he's already told us if we come up in the dark, what's going to happen to us. We'll make the news, but it'll be our 15 minutes of fame, and we're done. Yeah. I don't know. Mama talking to mama, Absolutely. But, so, yeah, exactly. It don't matter what you are. If you're a mama, I don't care what type of animal, you're right there. But, so that rod, that protection, and what else? Because I can get egocentric. What does that shepherd staff do? Corrects. Jerks me back. Right? We know, you've heard this time and time again, sheep are not smart. I've truly read, I'm not been around sheep, but I've read if one starts going down the mountain, guess where the rest are following? Down the mountain. Okay, so God is there to protect us. God is there to redirect us. Okay, and even when, getting to verse 4, even though we walk through the darkest valley, even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though we walk through death's valley, right, we will fear no evil because he is there with us. He is there to protect us. How does that comfort us? Because there are times that, we watch something, or there are times that we hear something and we think, this world's going to, where in a handbasket. And how do we as God's people maintain hope, as Ann said back there, and maintain that God is with us, that we'll fear no evil? There we go. That as chaotic as it may get, and things like that God is still in control. That we believe as people of faith that there is a master plan. And even though that plan sometimes looks like it is just absolutely being blown to smithereens, that we believe God knows what's happening. And we believe that God, and yeah. Okay. All right, so I've given you on here the second page, the back of the page here, my theology, and you can certainly disagree with that because people do, in all sincerity. I do not believe God causes the valley of the shadow of death. But I do believe God can use the tough times that we're in. So again, if your theology is different, I respect that. I truly do. But I do believe that God can help us through those times. And God is there with us through those times. Okay, I think we've discussed that right there. Okay, so verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. What does that say? What's happening? What you think? Okay, so one is the table's there, all right? I don't like to think of that. I don't like to think the people that I'm just teasing. Yeah, what's the old, we're going to be surprised when we get there because of who God, yeah. What else could that mean? Absolutely, that the table's there and it's for everybody. What else could that mean? You prepare a place for me, a table. You prepare, let me get back so I don't have to go from memory. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Go ahead. I don't want to. No? Mm. Okay, yeah. And that even with your enemies, so you're sitting there and we're still thinking that our cup's overflowing? How? Okay, because see, guys, it's perspective, right? It's perspective. That even when those enemies are there, God can't get it, or God can't get us. The enemies can't get us because God's got us. Okay, that it's and this is not how David wrote it. He wrote it much better. Anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. But how do we look at that cup? How do we look at the cup that God has given us? Right? Do we believe that goodness and mercy, as many of us learned it, will follow us all the days of our lives? Do we believe that we'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever? And hear that. The other, I think it's New Revised Standard Version, says my whole life long, or something like that. Yeah. Point being with there is sometimes we think about that and we think just heaven. When we become followers of God, that life starts then. Okay? And God is with us then, and God will be with us forever. Okay? Other thoughts on that? So when we become fearful, when we look at stuff, when we look at the world, we should have a message to the world that says, do you know my shepherd? Do you know the one who, and then give the personal examples. Again, we get back to that testimony. We get back to how God has helped us, how God has pulled us back, how God has protected us, how God has been there for us. Okay? And I do want to read Eugene Peterson's perspective. So here's how he renders the 23rd Psalm. God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head, my cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. Okay. Comments or questions on the 23rd Psalm? Okay, let's go to God in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this night. I pray that in our discussion that you can take what we have said and use it in the way that we need. God sometimes get fearful. If not fearful, then at least we're concerned with the way things can be. Help us to know you are walking by our side. Help us to know that you are there. Help us to know that we don't have to fear, that you are guiding us, leading us, and that your plan will come to fruition. And help us to know this in Christ's name. Amen.